Okay, Happy New Year, everybody. Happy New Year. Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the January 17th meeting of the Baltimore Regional Transit Commission. I'm John Laria, the Commission Chair. I wanted to say for the record that I'm rooting for the Commanders as well. If I had a Commanders jersey or something, I would have figured out how to combine them. But you know, this is the Baltimore Regional Transit Commission, so it only seems legitimate that we should be dressing like this. And you know, if we're lucky, I guess the Commanders and the Ravens will beat the Super Bowl, and we can divide our loyalties at that time. But I am very happy. I'm very happy for my friends who have been suffering in the Washington area, and it's great to see both teams doing so well. So I'm happy to be here. I did not, as I told Scott earlier, I did not include the camo pants, which I'm saving if we advance. So whatever, if we advance, it's going to be jersey and camo pants. But go Ravens, and thanks everybody for passing these around. Yeah. Thanks everybody for being here. We have our usual packed agenda. And some really interesting and important information to convey to you about the CTP, which of course is not a surprise since you've been reading about it, and then other things in terms of our fundamental work plan for the year aside from that. So welcome and thanks for being here. Don, is there anything that you want to call to our attention before we return to the agenda? I can't wait till the end. Okay. And we may, for those of you following along the agenda, we may move things around a little bit just in deference to the speakers and schedules and so on, which I'm sure will be okay. So we're first going to turn, though, on the agenda to the MTA administrator for her updates. She's not going to cover her budget, so don't ask her budget questions. She's going to come back to talk about budget along with a few others, but we'll turn to her for her normal monthly MTA update. Holly.
Good morning, Happy New Year, everybody. And while Don pulls it up, it's more of a kind of year-end recap, right? We're in January, so like what did we accomplish last year? What are we looking forward to this year? We get a little flavor of both of those from our presentation and then also the budget discussion.
Wait a second, sorry. Let me just say to the commission, I'll vamp for 30 seconds. The annual report item, which is number 3 on the agenda, which the commission knows, is not only the annual report, but also I solicited through Don some feedback from you on last year. We're going to have a little focused discussion, talk a little bit about what we did last year, how you all felt about it, how it might affect what we want to do this year. We obviously have a full work plan, but you know the commission we can adjust that as necessary. So I did ask the commission to think about it a little bit in advance. If you've not thought about it a little bit in advance, I've now moved the agenda item down enough that you can think about it while you're here. But I know that everybody's thought about it in advance. And I think we even got a little bit of feedback in advance. So that's going to move. And now, the MTA updates.
Okay, I'm going to be fairly short and sweet, but I did want to, celebrate the work the team has done the past year. I think we're at a good, foundation to continue to move forward as an agency. So in terms of state of good repair, we're going to talk a lot about that today, but we did make progress last year on a few key projects. Our metro rail cars and our signal system testing has continued. We are on track to have those new rail cars in service this year. I've ridden along a couple times. They are going to be a fantastic improvement for the system. It will also allow us to provide reliable service because we are not currently doing that. We're cutting way too many trains every day, and new trains will allow us to do that. We replaced our West Cold Spring pedestrian bridge. One of our aerial piers that had some issues have been replaced in the past year. We also got the Mandalman elevator in service. It was in really rough condition, and so now it's in service and there's a new modern elevator there. Along with a number of track upgrades and replacements. Even just this week, we did some single tracking on light rail to fix a few different issues, and we're continuing to address the state of good repair issues throughout the system. I do wanna brag on the team. They've done a really good job on the track side in terms of like red and black conditions on the system and being able to get to a point where like we don't have slow zones because of the work they've done on track side. On the workforce side, I set a goal at the beginning of the year to reduce our agency hiring time by 25%, and we blew past that and reduced the time by 40%. So if you wanna come work for the agency, it now doesn't take 6 to 9 months like it used to. It's still longer than I would like, but we're working at kind of chipping down on the amount of time that it takes from when we advertise to when we bring someone on board. We hired more than 400 new operators for the second year in a row. So we're continuing to bring operators in at a very fast pace and make sure that we are fully staffed. I think as of yesterday, we had 9 vacancies in a bus operator. So like we are, right, like we're fully staffed, and that's where we expect to be, right? Like we're never gonna be at 100%. There's always people retiring, resigning, whatever reason. And so as long as we can keep our classes about 15 and lose about 15 people per month, we'll be in this good steady state. We did launch our bus maintenance apprenticeship program. So on the maintenance side, we're preparing for the future by bringing folks in to train them through a 3-year program in partnership with Baltimore County Community College and partnership with the ATU. That was many years of labor to get to that point. And so like the fact that it's up and running and there are people sitting in seats and working with our team is really fantastic. On the performance side, again, huge amount of improvements that we've made there. Core bus in particular is one that I'd like to highlight. In January 2024, on an average day, we were cutting about 12% of our service. We ended the year cutting less than 2%. So there are always fluctuations by month. The beginning of the year is always a little higher, just weather and folks get to reset with their leave. But we're on the right track to be able to continue that trend this year. And our ridership was up 14%. So we did hit post-pandemic highs for all of our modes. And so again, people are recognizing the importance of the system, continuing to come back to it. We launched our MARC Growth and Transformation Plan, held a public meeting on December 12th, more than 160 attendees, and got a lot of feedback on that. The goal of this plan is to lay out what the future of our MARC service looks like and how much it's going to cost. I think we've had all these plans out in the past, but never really identified what costs will be and how we could implement these in different phases. So that's the goal of this. The recording is online if you want to watch it. It's a fairly long, but a good discussion, a lot of really good questions that came out of that. We're looking to finalize the plan later this year. We launched merch. This is kind of a joke that everyone laughs about, but at the same time, it's a good way for people to be able to support the system. The amount of folks who kind of jumped on and bought the sweaters, and I loved it. There you go. I loved when I would get on a bus and see someone in a sweater and be able to call them out like, hey, you bought the sweater. And so it was really fantastic. We sold a lot of stuff. It's something we'd like to continue to expand upon, allowing people to show their support visibly for the system. We also got some recognition from the WTS. Each year they hold an award ceremony, WTS Baltimore. So we had 4 employees that were recognized this year, most out of any different agency. So our MTA Police Chief, Jerome Howard, received the Honorable Ray LaHood Man of the Year Award. So we're thrilled about that. The Rosa Parks Diversity Leadership Award was presented to Aisha Darby. She's the leader of our newly founded Women in Transit Employee Resource Group, which actually Dr. Shavas got to come and speak with them this week, and so much good positive feedback about that. And then 2 of our frontline folks won Frontliner Awards. Suzette Barron, who is one of our light rail field supervisors, was recognized for her outstanding customer service. If there's ever a light rail shuttle bus and you see a supervisor out there who is doing a fantastic job, 9 times out of 10 it's Suzette. She is just amazing and does a really good job. And then our mobility operator, Tavon Richard Laird, who gets so many compliments for going above and beyond and helping our riders, was also recognized for her service. On the engagement side, we're continuing to make sure that we are engaging with the community not hitting the entire year, but really this just since we last met. We did our holiday bus, we participated in the Mayor's Holiday Parade, MTA Police did Adopt a Family. We did Sundays with Santa for the first time at our metro station at Mondawmin, so folks who come for free get their picture taken with Santa and check out the train garden. Our Youth Transit Council has been meeting and is working on a couple projects for us, and we are planning on participating in the MLK Parade on Monday. Weather permitting, we'll see what happens there, but we're going to continue again to make sure that we're investing and participating in the community. And I did want to share, we did an end of year wrap up video. See if I can actually do this. Make the sound come on. Give it 1 second. Yeah, we put out a video on social, again, just allowing folks to see, hey, here's the work that we've done. A lot of our employees to see and share it as well. You know, I've got a lot of good feedback from employees that they appreciate their hard work being spotlighted and shined. All right, let's test this out. I don't know if you guys can hear. If not, we will just send you the link.
At the Maryland
Can you
Transit
hear that?
Administration, we work every day to earn your trust in all the ways that matter. When it comes to
How do I make the video be up there? Sorry, this is Dawn with our tech here.
Now you're in trouble.
Fortunately, there's professions like coaching, teaching.
There we go, video and sound this time.
At the Maryland Transit Administration, we work every day to earn your trust in all the ways that matter. When it comes to safety, reliability, and your satisfaction with our service, our focus is on getting you where you need to go every time. In 2024, we worked hard to make sure you could count on MTA to deliver the most efficient, affordable service possible. This past year, our State of Good Repair program was at the forefront with replacement of the Rogers Avenue pedestrian bridge and the West Cold Spring Metro subway platform, replacement of the critically needed Von Dowden elevator, and the restoration of track along the light rail system to ensure the long-term quality of the system. We launched our first apprenticeship program in our bus maintenance division to keep our workforce strong and our buses road ready. 2024 was a year for enhancing Maryland's transit network and preparing it for a bright future. We won grants totaling $220 million that will help replace our entire light rail fleet, build a new pedestrian connection to the Patapsco light rail stop, and greatly expand our transit signal priority program. The red line continued to move forward. We held more than 45 public events and heard from nearly 2,000 people to ensure the project meets the needs of the region. The purple line received the first 7 light rail vehicles and completed major construction on the University of Maryland College Park campus. On Metro, we installed a new communications-based train control system, which will allow brand new cars to enter service in 2025. And we announced that BART train service and the Virginia Railway Express are now cross-honoring tickets, an important step to advance connectivity in the region. All this work behind the scenes makes it possible for us to focus on our ultimate goal at MTA, to provide an outstanding level of customer satisfaction. That's why we provided a major upgrade of the transit app free to our riders, and also added the convenience of ChartPass to the transit app to make purchasing tickets even easier. Our focus on customer satisfaction means we continue to engage our riders in public meetings to help determine the future of transit in Baltimore and the future of transit for the region's youth. With free rides for veterans on Veterans Day and free rides for everyone on Election Day and World Car Free Day, MTA continues to promote ridership throughout the year, and the numbers are adding up. Ridership in 2024 increased by 15% compared to 2023. MTA provided nearly 70 million rides, and every mode hit post-pandemic ridership highs in 2024. Wherever our riders need to get to, jobs, school, medical appointments, shopping, we show up, and we support them, all our riders. And for those who love transit, we made it possible to let the world know by launching our first transit merchandise store. 2024 was a busy year for MTA, but we're not slowing down, because no matter what, we never forget who we're working for.
All right, thank you for letting me share that, and yeah, once sure you guys have the.
How they have here.
Gotta love the YouTube automatic. But we'll make sure again we share the link and encourage you guys to share it as well. And I do also want to, thank this group for existing, for advocating for us, for coming to visit a couple times, continuing to ask good questions and help us as we're continuing to guide for the future. So didn't get you the video this year, maybe next year, but just again, a huge thank you to all the team for everything that you guys do coming here, Fridays and asking us lots of questions. We do really appreciate it.
We'll see if other folks have questions. First of all, I want to reciprocate. Before I reciprocate, I want to say congratulations on getting someone for the video who knows it's pronounced Patapsco.
I laugh because that is not how I think it's pronounced.
That's how it's pronounced. But I do want to say, and I think we've said this before, but it bears repeating. Thank you for your kind words. I know on behalf of the commission has been working hard. I'm grateful, as I said previously, to the commissioners for coming and doing all the things that you said. But I think we're all grateful to MTA. I mean, I really become just so appreciative of your leadership and your team and the hard work of people that we've seen on the visits. It was very rewarding, gratifying to go out and see people working hard, making things happen. I know we're going to talk about the budget. The budget's going to get better, but what you're managing to do, what they're managing to do in difficult environment is really extraordinary, providing the service that you're providing. So I want to thank you and your team on behalf of the commission as well. With that, I'm just going to open the floor if anybody has questions about what you've seen. Oh, my other one question for you is, what are you going to do with that video other than show it to us? Because I'm sure it wasn't. Are you using it? Well, tell us.
Yeah, so I mean, we put it out on social, so all of our social platforms, we've shared it internally with our team, so they're able to share it. I mean, it is kind of just like our marketing. I'm going to get ENT next week, and then the Transit Caucus, and so we'll make sure that our elected officials have that as well to show like, hey, here's some real things that we're doing with the dollars that you're giving us and investing. Good,
thank you. Okay, questions? Like,
More of a comment, but I just wanted to say that even the highlights you've given, let alone what's been happening in these meetings, I think it's really important amidst all the budget discussions, and it comes down to, is this dollar amount up or down? It is, to me, very impressive how far you are able to take the dollars you have, the kind of operational efficiencies you found, the improvements on staffing. I mean, those are all administrative, leadership, operational decisions. And I think that it should be perhaps platform more in our advocacy, that their ability to stretch the dollar they have, imagine what they would do with an even bigger budget. So I think that really cannot be taken for granted, particularly in larger state agencies. So thank you.
Thank you, Linky. Others, questions or comments? Yes, sir, Mike.
It was all of the highlights that came out, and what I've also actually seen. One thing that wasn't brought out is and which MTA has improved on, and I get this from the many sessions that we had. In the rail systems, when you talk about pedestrian strikes and the safety has the concerns that have been, the minor things, in which sometimes budget constraints would, hold MTA back from doing it. But I think as, administrator and your team, y'all have gone above and beyond to put those things first and not saying, hey, the dollar amount before actual safety. And the report that's been given to the union with those situations have gone down, which, like I said, didn't say, but I want to get that out and compliment, as far as the safety was concerned. And we have seen improvements. And it's because of councils like, committees like this and the joint partnerships that's there. And MTA, they are doing their best to adhere to and work with all those in a collaborative effort. So thank you.
Oh, thank you, Mike. And I would be remiss if I didn't. We highlight a lot of the union employees in the video, but like the partnership that we have with Mike in particular is really fantastic. Our Joint Safety Commission, I will put us up against any transit agency in the country, to be honest. Like the collaborative working relationship we have with the goal of not like union versus management, it's how do we jointly advance safety at the agency, and it's a really fantastic partnership. And again, those light rail operators, I've had the opportunity to sit in the cab while they're operating. Man, they do a fantastic job of recognizing and stopping, and I really appreciate the hard work that they do.
Great. Anybody else? Okay, thanks, Holly. I think we're going to next hear from the Assistant Secretary, Mr. Bridges, talk to us about CTP and a few other things. So, Tony, yeah, please, that'd be great. Sure. Sure.
Donna's being nice enough to give me a backdrop at least while I speak, because I don't have a presentation for you all. But I do want to say, well, first of all, Happy New Year to everyone, because I do feel like I'm just seeing everybody again, at least in person, for the beginning of the year. So Happy New Year. And please forgive me because I am not in uniform. I know this is Purple Friday, but I forgot to look at the memo. And so I'm not in my purple, although I am rooting for the Ravens, as everybody else in here is, I hope. But also just want to say thank you to this commission. As Holly also stated, the work that you've done has really been very much appreciated. All the calls, the sort of questions, remarks that you have, we really do take that all into account. I'm looking forward to full 2025 and all the work that we're going to continue to do together because you did really lay the foundation in 2024. So thank you. Let me just say on Wednesday, under the leadership of Governor Moore and Secretary Wiedefeld, MDOT released its final consolidated transportation program for fiscal years 2025 and 2030. Thanks to Governor Moore's leadership, this balanced plan includes an additional $420 million in state transportation funding annually, beginning in fiscal year 2026. This investment allows the department to fully leverage all available federal funds and financing to turn a $420 million annual investment into $695 million annually of new resources for the state's transportation network. This vital investment will allow the department to make critical investments in safety and system preservation.
Oh, is it me? Okay.
Jake.
Look, this investment will allow the department to really make critical investments in safety and system preservation and grow our economy, as well as utilize all federal funding available to us under the historic bipartisan infrastructure law. With approval of the General Assembly, this proposed revenue increase would actually come from a new 75-cent retail delivery fee, a targeted repeal of the vehicle trading allowance that ensures also that lower income Marylanders actually maintain access to that credit, modifying the timing of future vehicle registration fee increases and increasing various motor vehicle administrative fees, many of which haven't been increased since the 1990s. The final CTP, as this commission is well aware, makes significant investments to the Baltimore Region Transit and Maryland Transit Administration. We appreciate the Baltimore Regional Transit Commission's guidance and input to both development and the draft of the final CTPs. As I said earlier, really your advocacy, your work has contributed to what the final CTP looks like, and we can't thank you enough. Turning our attention to the details of the budget, this budget really focuses on putting MTA back on track to excellence. Secretary Wiedefeld, Administrator Arnold, and I know that we cannot expand the system while Baltimore's core systems reliability is at risk. Sadly, I will say that in many respects, the way that the system
Fortunately,
is in now is the same condition that Secretary Wiedefeld found the condition when he was administrator, and to some respects when I was chief of staff for the MTA. Secretary Wiedefeld and Governor Moore will not allow this to continue and will end the chronic disinvestment of the core system. To put MTA's Baltimore transit system back on track, this budget addresses MTA's most critical needs, its people and its infrastructure, to provide reliable access to opportunity for more Marylanders and employers. This includes fulfilling Secretary Wiedefeld's commitment to install 200 new positions at the Maryland Transit Administration to improve the delivery and reliability of existing transit services. In addition, it includes 26 new positions across MDOT to support priority areas of cybersecurity, asset management, and project and capital delivery. I don't want to steal too much of Holly's thunder because I know she's going to talk about specifically the investment for MTA as well. Additionally, this investment will meet and exceed the Transit Safety and Investment Act thresholds, including fully funding the modernization of our light rail system. The overhaul includes fully leveraging the $213 million federal grant to buy new light rail vehicles, important communication and electrification service upgrades, and new tracks, particularly along Howard Street. This will prevent indefinite service disruptions and increase reliable service across the network. In addition, this program will also include new and upgraded vehicle maintenance facilities and overhaul stations to accommodate the new modern low-floor vehicles. This program represents the first new significant investment in our current system since its creation. And when complete, this system will provide frequent, reliable, and affordable high-quality transit for everyday Baltimoreans, as well as visitors and tourists to the wonderful region. Critically ensuring that the current light rail system is in a state of good repair is important for positioning the red line for future federal investment. This light rail overhaul totals over $1.3 billion through 2035. So this additional funding will also make further investments in our state of good repair across MTA and support significant repairs to the Baltimore Metro system, including station repairs, communication systems projects, and platform rehabilitation, all with the aim to put the system we love back on track. The final CTP also maintains $152 million in project development support for the red line as we work towards identification of a locally preferred alternative and entrance into the federal capital investment grant process. However, as we know, MTA and MDOT are just one piece of the puzzle. We also rely on strong partnerships and local government to deliver services to the people of Maryland. So this plan supports the department's commitment to increase support for locally operated transit systems, the LOTS program, in communities here in Baltimore and around the state. A couple of highlights from that includes providing $135 million in operating support and new capital support to include for Baltimore supporting the purchase of new ferries for the Harbor Connector service, and additional capital support for lots in Baltimore County, Anne Arundel, Queen Anne's, Carroll, Hartford, and the city of Annapolis. And other partners around the state will enable new clean bus purchases, facility support, and other critical transit investments. So while NDOT understands the focus of the commission is on Baltimore and regional transit, I would be remiss without mentioning at least a few of our major multimodal highlights for both MDOT and our local partners here. We are fully meeting the state's $450 million commitment to the transformative Frederick Douglass Rail Tunnel program, which will allow for enhanced intercity and transit services in the Baltimore region and across the state. We are supporting generational investments at the Port of Baltimore. That includes $185 million to decarbonize the port and $80 million to address the aging infrastructure at the Dundalk Marine Terminal. We're maintaining our funding commitments for the highway user revenues, which I know is very important from the draft CTP. We're also restoring funding on numerous requested local priority projects. And so the design and right-of-way acquisition for I-795 at Dole Baltimore Boulevard interchange, the design and right-of-way acquisition and utility work for I-97, and new funding for the Chem Lampier Bikeways program that provides competitive grant support for local government active transportation projects, and the complete street enhancements on numerous state corridors to include Howard and Hartford counties. Slow economic growth is a challenge in Maryland, and we're facing that head on. So through the targeted and strategic investments outlined in our final CTP, we're doing our part to drive strong economic results, create good paying jobs for Marylanders, and support the services Marylanders care most about. That includes working with our partners to address the housing crisis through the expansion of transit-oriented development, what I'll talk about in a little while when we get to the legislative proposals. In October, the department released a strategic plan for development around MARC pin line stations, and we're actively seeking development partners in the Odenton MARC station. This also includes new workforce development funding, dubbed our Roads to Career program, which we're actively soliciting partnership to advance apprenticeship programs like the one you just heard Holly talk about. These all strengthen our transportation workforce and really create opportunities for Marylanders of all backgrounds. In close, this budget represents a transition in strategy for the department and administration. And we're putting Baltimore's core system back on track, and we're positioned to expand the system for many years to come. I really do, in closing, want to say how much we do appreciate the BRTC. From the beginning, it's been a labor of love for me in particular, and the work that you have done, especially over the last year, to really be advocates for everything MTA, we're going to need you to continue to be advocates for. And so on that end, before I do close, I also want to bring up Deputy Chief of Staff for the Governor's Office, Shana Hernandez, to talk about the advocacy work not just the work that you've done, but the work that, you know, we're gonna continue and that we're gonna need your help with as well.
Thanks, Tony. Hi, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Shana Hernandez. I am one of the governor's deputy chiefs. I have transportation in my portfolio along with housing, natural resources, environment, emergency management, energy, a number of other things, but for today, transportation. So you heard the plan, you've got a document in front of you that lays it out, hopefully in an aesthetically pleasing way. And like Tony said, I mean, this plan is really about economic development. It's about ensuring that the businesses that are here and the businesses that are not here have the infrastructure that they need in order to be successful. Our economy has been really stagnant over the last 10 years, and we really need to invest in our transportation system in order to help turn that trend around. And it's gonna take all of the voices in this room. It's not something that the government can do on its own. We really need all of the partners who are going to benefit from this package, including, you know, universities, healthcare, transit advocates, bikers, walkers, everybody who uses the system has a role to play. So we are gonna be standing up a little bit of a coalition to keep folks coordinated on different actions that can be taken throughout session, including, you know, whatever media channels you already have or whatever comms channels you already have, coming to hearings to testify, things like that. So if you're interested in helping out, let me know. I have a few cards for anyone who doesn't know how to get in touch with me. And you can also talk to Tony. Tony is really the lead here. I'm just hanging out. So that's it.
Thank you, Shana.
Oh, yes, Dan?
So questions for Tony or for Shana, please? And I'll just say, Holly is going to give us a sort of very MTA specific
Yes.
presentation, so feel free if you like to say, well, Holly's gonna cover that and that'll be fine. Please go ahead.
I think.
Oh, I'm sorry, Lester, pardon me. Shannon, thank you for that. There are a number of, I think, groups that a number of us cross over on and sit on different either committees or commissions or boards, et cetera, that are gonna be engaged. And so I'll follow with you offline, but I'd be curious to make sure we're coordinating efforts to maximum effect. And then how do we bring some of us that are larger institutions have like government affairs apparatus as well. And so to think about bills that may cross over, that could be about like social drivers of health, which we care about,
Yep.
that aren't just healthcare, but are all like transportation and others. So he'd love to hear what you're just saying and we count us all in.
Yeah, Lester, that's exactly right. We're gonna have, I think, weekly meetings so that we can talk about exactly those things for the week ahead. Hoping to have them later in the week to talk about the week ahead and make sure that everybody's kind of tight on what's going on. I'd love for your legislative folks to join that, your comms folks, anybody who's relevant who can help. And you're absolutely right, it's not just transportation, it's health, it's education, it's safety, above all things too, it's safety. It's ensuring the safety of the kids who are riding buses to school here in the city. So like I said, there's room for every voice and we really need every voice that's gonna be successful.
And just to add to that, you know, my office also tracks all the legislative pieces of transportation, which don't just touch on transportation, it touches on all those other things that you talked about. Matt Michler is the Director of Government Affairs for Maryland Department of Transportation. In your packet, you should have a one-pager for 2 of our legislative proposals. His contact information is there as well. So I'd love to make sure that we keep you all plugged in with our legislative proposals as session goes on. And at the same time, some things that are upcoming that we would love your assistance with. We've got a number of hearings around the budget that are coming up, and I did provide that to the chair. So we'll make sure that that gets sent around and we'll plug you in for any upcoming sort of sessions or hearings that we also would need your support at as well.
And our hope is that when you're out in the community, either at events that your entity is putting on or elsewhere, that you're talking about how important this is for safety and for economic development. Because like I said, I mean, it's one thing coming just from the government, but it's, I think, even more important and more impactful coming from the folks who benefit the most from it.
Yes, Andrea, please.
Thank you, Shana, and I can definitely say for Baltimore County and as a vice chair on this commission that we appreciate the work that the governor's office has done in terms of the budget and the support so that we don't have to go into the hard times that we all thought that we were gonna go into. I do have a very specific question though, since we are going into the legislative session. I know there's a lot of bills that have been introduced before on transit and the MTA in particular and dividing the MTA pulling Mark out of the MTA and things of that sort. And the commission has been doing a lot of work on the study. So could you give us any feedback on you all's take on the study or the direction so that this commission can know, at least get an idea of what the governor's office is actually planning or looking forward to as we start to try to advocate in Annapolis as well?
Yeah, so we haven't gotten to that point yet because we evaluate bills on a weekly basis depending on what's coming up. So essentially, like whatever's coming up next week is kind of what we focus on and decide positions and things like that. So until the hearing kind of comes up a little closer for that particular bill that you're talking about, Andrea, we won't really know exactly what the position is. I would say generally, our focus is on this package. So this is gonna be the number one priority. We may take a position when it comes to MTA or the MARC bill, but more than likely, it's gonna be mostly just focusing on this revenue package.
Other questions for? I just want to say, I'm sure I speak for everybody when I say that you will have our full engagement. Those dates are already on my calendar, testified last year in the MTA budget. I plan to do it again. It sort of put us in coach, no pun intended. Everybody has ambitions and intentions to make this the best possible system and to expand it and all of those things. I know that the secretary, the governor, that's where we want to get to. But right now, we have a state of good repair crisis, we have safety issues, we have some foundational elements that really need to be put into place. And I've been extremely impressed by the seriousness of commitment that's been made here. I think we know how lean the budget is, we know how difficult it is. And I want to thank MDOT, Tony, Secretary, Shana, you and your work on behalf of this portfolio, this enormous portfolio that you have, and particularly the governor and lieutenant governor for recognizing, how important this is. I give the commission credit and others credit for waving the flag. I think the flag needed to be waved, but we also all have to come together and make sure that we can get done what the governor has sort of positioned us to get done in this session. And I think we can do it if we all work together. And by the way, if you look at the specific elements of what's been added back, it's the stuff we asked for. It's the stuff that we identified, not just us, but in the CTP tour, which was extraordinary this year, in the legislature, all sorts of folks. There's been a real consistency of identification of the things that really matter, sort of key first steps. And I would submit to you that, by and large, those are what the governor has responded to and put them in the budget. So I'm really grateful to the governor. I hope you'll express our appreciation, and we will. But we're going to do everything we can do. And we're at your service in our respective roles and our hats, and to try and get this done because it needs to get done.
Thanks, John. And that's a good, just circling back to what you said about the projects that came back in. The projects that came back in are very much tied to the number on the paper. So if the proposal starts to shrink, that means that the projects also shrink. So just a thought as you're kind of thinking through everything that you're seeing in the newspaper and everything else, like at the end of the day, we're trying to get these projects done and there's a reason for it. So I'm gonna walk around with some cards just really quick. If you want to be involved, I would urge you to please reach out quickly. I'm hoping to start these calls next week. And that's it.
Any other, before we turn to Holly for the MTA specific presentation, are there any other questions or comments to direct to the Assistant Secretary and the Deputy Chief?
I'll add one non-transit comment that I'm just really want to reinforce the investment report. I think it's critically important in the economic development story, and I think ultimately links to transit from a workforce perspective.
This package includes a big project to redo for it's actually 11. Is it just 11 or is it 11 and 13?
That's just 11.
Just 11.
Okay. Last chance for the moment. Okay, thank you both very, very much. We really appreciate it. Holly, back to you for a specific MTA specific presentation.
Well done, pull that up. I do want to thank Shana, like having her in the governor's office is fantastic, such an amazing resource. Thank Governor Moore and Governor Miller, for recognizing, Lieutenant Governor Miller, for recognizing the issue, addressing the issue, Secretary Wiedefeld, Assistant Secretary Bridges. I think it's a fantastic team recognizing the issue. I also want to thank this team, right, for continuing to advocate for the needs of MTA. All the things that we've talked about in these meetings, some of the things that you've seen at our tours are what I'm going to talk about today. So the issues that we've talked about are being addressed, and I think the advocacy of this group really goes a long way there. So while all the things are important, and I want to urge supporting the entire package because it really is a transportation system, I'm going to dive in specifically on MTA because that's what I get to do. So some highlights from the CTP. As Tony said, this does really do what it needs to get us back on track, right? Like gets us back on track towards providing the system that the region needs and the region serves. So starting on the operating side, maintaining all existing service levels, with 171 pins added in the proposed FY26 budget. So that goes a long way towards the Secretary's commitment that he made when he first came in towards adding new pins to MTA. So I'll dive a little bit later on into what specific pins we're going towards. Additional 800 million, a little over 800 million focus on safety and state of good repair. And it really is tied to economic development as well. We've talked in these meetings about the economic benefit of MTA, the benefit that it brings to the region and to the state. And I believe you guys may have been invited to an event next week in Annapolis to talk about the economic impact of MTA specifically. So again, we are an economic driver, and so we want to continue to make sure that we're investing in that. So highlights here, more than 400 million for the light rail modernization program, which will again fully fund that program, allow us to replace the vehicles, allow us to upgrade the stations, allow us to replace the tracks on Howard Street. A lot of other kind of really important things to have essentially almost just a brand new system, right? So it's gonna look and feel drastically different from what it does today. I do want to note there is an amendment that's needed to the Garvey bill to allow that. We're planning on using the Garvey funds for that. So we will make sure that you guys have the information to support that bill amendment. I mentioned Howard Street already. We've been talking about Howard Street rail replacement for probably 10 years. Louis and I have been in multiple meetings about Howard Street rail replacement. It is funded, we are going to do it. And so very excited to see that moving forward. We'll be looking forward to working with the city on, what specifically that looks like, what other projects that we can tie in, because MTA is an important function on Howard Street. But the sidewalks, the trees, all those other things like really still matter. And so we want to make sure we're partnering there. A MARC locomotive midlife overhaul is funded. Metro elevators and escalators, so you will be able to actually get to the stations and the platforms, and funding to upgrade and rehab platforms and other station repairs, including better lighting. Again, a brand new look and feel for some of those stations. And also funding for the dedicated bus lanes. Dedicated bus lanes go a long way towards allowing us to be more efficient, speed up our service. Some of them are not in great shape, so we have some funding here to be able to repair and rehab some of those so we can continue to get the benefits of them. Continued replacement of the metro vehicles and train control system. I mentioned we're on track to have that go into service later this year. Continue to work to advance the Frederick Douglass Tunnel. So it fully funds MTA's $450 million commitment to that, which will allow for significant improvements to MARC service, including both in speed, reliability, and overall service. So there's additional service that comes once the project is done. And I can't say enough, a new finally ADA accessible West Baltimore MARC station. Work on that is ongoing right now. There's another really good video that we can make sure you get the link to that Amtrak put out recently about that project and the benefits of the project and the community impacts associated with that. It retains our commitment to project development for the Red Line, so over 152 million is still in that project. It does defer the transition of zero emission buses. So, when we talked in the fall about money coming out of the program, it included money coming out for zero emission buses. So this money coming back in, it actually takes care of a lot more of our state of good repair issues previously, since we're not bringing back the zero emission bus program. Specifically in Baltimore core service areas, since I know you're gonna ask about that. So broken down by core mode, I did not include MARC, but it pained me because I know there's some discussions about is MARC included or not. There are MARC improvements, there's MARC locomotives improvements that will benefit Baltimore as well. But specifically here, the increase by mode, so core bus goes up by 1.4 million. Light rail is obviously the biggest winner here, 474. Metro, 28 million. Mobility gets some increase in funding for additional vehicles. And then we have a pot that's Metro and light rail state of good repair that we're still working through some of the specifics of almost $200 million. Overall capital budget by mode, So this is a similar slide to what we showed you guys for the draft CTP.
I'm sorry, can I just ask a question? Can we go back? I'm just curious, because you have two separate lines for light rail and mobility. I'm just curious as to why there's a separate line.
Because it's metro and light rail state of good repair. Some things that go over like system wide that go through kind of like both systems. So we're gonna be making sure we're assigning it to specific projects. We'll be happy to share that information. Capital budget breakdown by mode, again, similar to what we showed you previously. So again, you can see here kind of where we are mode by mode. Again, the core system here in Baltimore really is receiving bulk funding, and the majority of it is going towards state of good repair. I did also want to highlight our capital budget performance, right? We get a lot of questions, well, you know, are you going to be ready to spend this money? And short answer, yes. Like our team has been really building over the past several years our capacity to spend, our pipeline, our ability to get projects out the door and completed. I mentioned some of those things previously that we've done, including setting up our program management oversight office to coordinate our rail projects. We're expanding that a little bit to look at our bus projects as well. Our procurement team is getting fully staffed. We have a procurement director, a deputy director, a lot of folks coming on board. And so we're really gearing up to be ready to spend this money. So in FY24, we did spend over 80% of our capital budget, which was the highest share since at least FY19. And we saw, again, year over year increases really ever since FY21. Spent over 300 million on state of good repair specifically for the first time since FY20. And again, those consecutive year over year. So the team is ready, is continuing to have that growth, and will be ready to spend this money. Operating budget, so our proposed FY26 operating budget is 1.3 billion. It's about 11%, I think, over what our current budget is. Still very much driven by labor and contracted services. So we really are service. So if you make changes to the operating budget, you have to make changes to service. We have an additional 171 pins, which again goes back to the commitment that the secretary made. So we have 70 for operations, kind of broken down into operators so that we can look at potentially increasing service strategically on some specific lines, and then a lot on our maintenance side. So light rail, metro, rail car maintenance in particular, which are areas where, because our vehicles are aging and our fleet is aging, we're seeing more needs there. We do have 23 for administration and planning, so continuing to build out that team to deliver on our capital budget and make sure that we're continuing to spend appropriately there. And then the Purple Line Police, as we're gearing up to open the Purple Line, we do need to ensure the safety and security of that system. And so we have some pins so that we can start hiring for that, because it takes a really long time to train and get a police officer. So I got the question, like, what are riders gonna see, right? Like, what does this mean? I see all these big numbers. So, broken down here a little bit, in 2025, increased bus reliability due to operator hiring. That has really occurred over 2024. That's going to continue in 2025, and we hope to continue to build on that. The new Metro rail cars will go in service, and that means that we can increase the frequency and the reliability of that system. Years 2 through 6, 26 through, do math there, 31. We're going to start rolling out a Metro track intrusion detection system. So what does that mean? Basically, if someone falls into the tracks, an alarm will blare. It will alert the operator in the train, so stop, so we can prevent some potential deaths or injuries in the system. There'll be new grates over our metro tunnels, on the streets and the sidewalks. I believe on one of the tours that we did, a few folks got to check out some of the grates on Baltimore Street and see that condition. Those will be new, they will be replaced. It will be a much improved, both for traffic on the road and for the metro tunnel. Elevator and escalator repairs and replacements on metro will begin. It is a long project. You can't do all of them at one time, but we'll start to kind of roll those out. We're worst first approach, so we'll hit different stations kind of based on the condition where they are. The light rail tracks on Howard Street will be replaced. There will be metro station platform repairs and lighting enhancements beginning to roll out. One that people probably won't see, but leaks in metro stations and tunnels, will be repaired, which again improves that experience. Multiple metro station plazas, including the restoration of station art. Our metro system has a lot of really cool art that hasn't been maintained for a long time. And so we're gonna look at those exteriors at the plazas and ensuring that it is an inviting place to allow people to want to come and use the system. Mark Electric locomotives will go into service on the Penn line, and then improve wayfinding audio announcements and real-time signs at bus and rail stations. A little bit further out, new light rail vehicles going into service. We've talked a few times about the timeline of receiving vehicles and getting them into service. So we're gonna be working as quickly as possible. We are advertising this month for a RFQ for those, so we're continuing to move forward as quickly as we can on some of that. Similarly, West Baltimore Mark Station and the Frederick Douglass Tunnel is under construction now, and it'll be complete in the 2030s timeframe. So going forward, again, it really is kind of building on the momentum, trying to get us back on track. So we've built on that capacity to spend. We're going to continue to work on improvements on our budget and being able to make sure we're delivering these projects. We're going to advance safety critical work and make sure we're leveraging our state of good repair and our federal funds to our best ability. Any questions?
Aaron, please. Yeah, just want to follow back. I totally understand the balancing act with the zero emission bus program that we have to kind of achieve. Is that program, are we still going to try to aspire to fulfill that program at some point? And as buses retire out, are we going to try to replace them with zero emission, or are we going to default to the standard bus system?
So our FY26 bus buy has us purchasing 20 electric buses and the rest clean diesel. 27 will be the same thing, so 20 electrics and the rest clean diesel. So we're gonna end up with a fleet of about 47 electric buses, which is kind of the limit that we can house at Kirk without pretty substantial infrastructure investments. So the plan for the foreseeable future is to continue to focus on clean diesel, hitting those high emission standards as best we can, getting more people on buses, which is better than in single occupancy vehicles. And we're gonna be closely monitoring what other agencies are doing, what the industry is doing, and see when it makes the most sense to kind of come back in. But I think right now, given the budget situation, investing in making sure that our systems are in a state of repair, that our light rail vehicles are working, our metro vehicles are working, is a better financial decision for the agency.
Totally understand. If I could just, from the commission perspective, we just shouldn't lose sight of this. And I can't help but be hard. It just hurts to see us continue to invest in this older infrastructure. I totally understand, but it just hurts. I mean, I see what other regions are doing in cities. Europe is way ahead of us. It's just unfortunate that we have to be, we're kind of forced in this dynamic. So I just want to make sure that as a commission,
I think it's important to know.
I mean, the one benefit Europe has over us, we just talked about this before, is they have more bus manufacturers.
Do we have manufacturers here that can do it? Because I thought they went out of business.
Two. So there's two bus manufacturers, and they're fairly limited. There's only one that does the 60-foot electric buses, and we do heavily rely on our 60-foot buses, especially on some of our high ridership routes. Actually, a lot that go out to Trade Point. You guys get almost all of our 60-footers. But so, looking at the capacity of the market, and we want to see, there's a lot of focus from the industry on how we can stabilize that market, how we can improve that market. We're on active task forces to look at that. So we're going to be monitoring and watching, and I think there may be an opportunity in the future, but in terms of like where we are today, it really is how do we stabilize this market?
Mr. Chair, if I can just please continue this. I mean, understanding the Buy America, I mean, it sounds like a fixed monopoly. I mean, I really think as a commission, we should maybe begin a dialogue with our federal delegation on looking at this. This is, I think, the American public's getting shortchanged in this scenario to the benefit of a very few, wherever that manufacturing facility is in whatever state. I think we just should bring this attention as we look at our system holistically, and we look at these challenges. I think there's a federal role to play, and hopefully as a commission, we can begin to advocate at that level too.
Don, let's figure out how we can find a slot on the agenda for an appropriate discussion so that we don't lose sight of it.
We can send you guys this reading material, some of the work that APTA has done. They have a really good task force report that has been very helpful. So we'll make sure that you guys get that.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions for Holly? Yes, Mike.
And I see that you have for the Purple Line Police, District Secretary for the Purple Line. Is there a start time of when like the operating portion of the Purple Line will be? And is the any portion of the, I see you have other here in the green, the 10%. Does that include like the MTA's portion of the operating budget for the purple line?
So the operating budget for the purple line, so the purple line is scheduled to open in the end of 2027. So it won't show up in our operating budget until FY 28. It is accounted for in the financial plan, and so it will start showing up at that point. Because it's a P3, the concessionaire is starting now to hire light rail operators and maintainers and all those other things. The vehicles are here and we're looking to test in the first quarter of this year.
Yes, Celeste.
Just a quick question. I know we focus a lot on light rail reliability, but I know Metro has been going through some issues as well. When will the new rail cars be in service, and are there any plans kind of Band-Aid in the meantime while we get them up and running?
All of the above, yes. So we are working to get them in service as quickly as possible. As of right now, assuming everything continues to go well, we're still on track for later this summer. We have another shutdown that's planned for next weekend. So we'll do a full weekend shutdown again for testing there. The weekend shutdowns have been really good. I mean, they're out 24 hours the entire time doing testing. It's getting lots of information. Yeah, I will fully admit we are not running good service right now on Metro. And so we've got a team that is fully engaged looking at like, how do we, a couple things have hit us at the moment. One is a wheel truing machine. We replaced the wheel truing machine, took it out of commission before having a plan to bring a new one into commission. This decision was made before I was in office, right? Or before I was in this role, right? Like it's one of those, like, I think we've talked before about decisions that are made a long time ago and then come to hit us now. And so that one's hitting us right now. And so, we have one wheelchair machine between the two modes. So we can take trucks over to light rail, but then it messes up light rail service. We're kind of balancing that. And the other one is bitter cold. Our vehicles in particular, the way that the traction motors are, they're DC traction motors, I want to say, versus AC. So they're impacted more by cold weather. So root for warm weather, but our team is on site, lots of overtime, doing everything that they can to try and restore the service at the moment.
Andrew?
Can you just remind us of the next major milestone for the red line?
We're looking to make an alignment announcement at some point this year.
I just want to, I thought that sort of what's the rider gonna see slide is an excellent slide and an excellent approach. It's probably not worth obsessing over this yet until we know what resources we have, and we have a lot of work to do to make sure you have the resources to do this. But I would just sort of put a pin in the idea that I think it's really useful for you to be able to tell us and tell everybody. Because you have these 6-year program, people get excited about something, they realize that it's not showing up for a couple of years, and on the other, so I think a real world view of when we should expect to see things and when other people should is very helpful. No reason to get, but when things settle down and you know what resources you have to work with, and hopefully it's all of these, it would be good to talk about it in these terms, because the CTP can get kind of abstract, the actual,
No, absolutely. And we want to make sure that we're letting folks know that, hey, it's not just money going into nowhere, like this is what you get for it.
Right.
Real stuff.
Okay, anybody else? Great, well, thank you very much, I appreciate it. Okay, so we've moved things around a little bit. What I would like to do, Tony, would you mind doing the legislative update, because it's all sort of part of this sort of looking to the General Assembly. Sorry, Don, don't get mad.
I worked to get this agenda.
Sorry, Don. I'll be fairly quick with the two proposals that I'll talk about today. Just as a caveat before we get into it, as we talked about earlier, there are a number, my office actually follows, tracks, and makes recommendations for the legislation. Anything dealing with transportation, MDOT, and all related sort of ancillary things that come along with that. There are hundreds of proposals that come to the Maryland General Assembly that we try to make sure that we're keeping the track of and making our recommendations for. And that's where, again, your advocacy is so important. The one thing that we all probably know about legislation is what you draft is not necessarily what comes out in the end. This commission is one example of that. So I think there were, I don't know how many bills we had, how many times we tried to move forward with something along this commission. And, you know, it took maybe 5 years before we got to the point where this commission is to the point where it is at this point. So just a caveat that, you know, what you hear today may not actually be what comes out at the end of the day. And at the same time, it may take years before some of this is actually done. However, this is our priority, so we hope that it doesn't take as long to move some of this through for legislation this year.
You're only allowed 3 caveats, and you've now spent them all. So, no, that's it.
All right, well, I'll
Caveat
stop with the
allowance
caveats
has now been
and
reached.
just get into at least 2 of our proposals. And you should have 1-pagers on those proposals in your packets as well, and we should be able to provide more of those for anyone that needs them. One of the ones that we've introduced is a transit-oriented development reform, which is House Bill 80, which is cross-filed with Senate Bill 190. We are looking at ways to energize the state's economy and address the structural housing and affordability and sustainability challenges that the state faces. So we're trying to make things easier to build a sustainable transit-oriented community that supports our shared goals of leveraging our existing infrastructure to drive long-term economic value. This legislation does seek several zoning reform initiatives to include elimination of our parking minimums near rail transit stations and exempt state-owned property used for a transportation purpose from local zoning controls. In addition, this legislation seeks to exempt TOD development from state procurement requirements, which really has contributed to delays and costs for TOD projects in the past. Lastly, this legislation authorizes certain local spending taxing districts to form along TOD corridors. And so it really enables existing TOD capital grant and loan funds to support early state planning and financing efforts for our TOD projects. With these proposed changes, MDOT and the Moore Miller administration really are seeking to continue our state's leadership in smart growth efforts to remove administrative and regulatory burdens that have slowed down TOD projects. Again, we've provided a one-pager on this legislative item for your review. And I'm happy to answer questions about that one if anyone has any. But there is another one that I did want to talk about, and this one that you already heard about. I think Jeff Anderson came and gave a presentation on this one previously. This is our Transit Investment and Priorities Act, also known as House Bill 20 and cross-filed as Senate Bill 198. It's our way to look at the future for major transportation impacts and the way that we deliver on the policy goals of the state. So what we're proposing to do is change the Consolidated Transportation Program to ensure the responsible management of our MDOT assets and make the process for selecting new capacity projects more transparent, objective, predictable, and effective for local governments and other state agencies. And this builds on the work of the Train Commission. It really aligns with the recommendations that they had in their interim report, not the final one. Specifically, this bill would do a couple of things. One, if you remember that Chapter 30 prioritization process, it really amends the Chapter 30 process to create a objective and measurable criteria for performance measures for our projects, both large and small projects, and provides a standardized guidance for county local priority letters, which we all know is sometimes those letters come in, they are not standardized, and you know, we get them from multiple organizations as well as the county, state, and nonprofits. And so we're trying to make sure that there's a standardized way that we have the process for those letters. We're also requiring MDOT to develop and utilize asset management practices to prioritize investments in existing assets and track the compliance through the annual attainment report and other measures. And we're going to amend the makeup, meeting frequency, and responsibilities of the Maryland Transportation Commission. This will help us to provide transparent public forums to review and discuss our project prioritization, the CTP, and the way that we do our MDOT finances. So this effort is another way that we're trying to align with the Moore and Miller administration's call to be really heart-led and data-driven. And it'll provide greater transparency to our capital projects and provide Marylanders insights into those projects. Again, we've included a one-pager on this legislative initiative for you. And if you have any questions on those 2 priorities, more than happy to take any questions for you right now. again, a lot of the other departmentals don't necessarily focus on the greater Baltimore region or MTA specifically, but we do have other priorities that we've submitted for the legislature, but these are two that are a priority that we think this commission might have some interest in. Any questions?
Don, you wanted to say something?
I just wanted to mention that you do have both a copy of HB 80 and HB 20, which are the two bills the Secretary was talking about. Also in your package is a one pager, both sides of we are starting to track here that may be of interest of the commission. We'll be updating that weekly. Fact of the matter is, as soon as you print this out, it's almost over. So just keep that in mind that we're trying to stay on top of this, and we'll be sending that out weekly.
Well, I want to just call attention to one. I mean, so we'll send that out because, and we'll have to figure out how people might want to engage with those things. There is, just to knit a few of these things together quickly, Delegate Corman has introduced already the Mark bill. Is it? I know it's going. Let's assume that it has been.
Right.
And that bill from Delegate Corman, who chairs that relevant committee in the House, would essentially remove Mark from MTA. And I don't know exactly what the delegate has in mind, but it's part of the bigger discussion that we've touched upon several times, and you'll hear a report on the authority study, which is about structure, governance of transit in Maryland. And, you know, I don't know what the appetite's going to be for something more comprehensive. The Deputy Chief of Staff explained, not totally surprisingly, that they're focused on the budget and getting the resources. But it's certainly possible that in this session, because of that bill or others, that there's going to be some sort of discussion. So we're going to try and figure out how to engage in that and stay connected to it, because this, you know, the study that we produced is at least a framework for that discussion. So we'll have to see. But I'm just alerting you to the fact that even if MDOT, for example, does not pursue that in this session, it's gonna come up in some way. And you know, how far it gets, I don't know. Whether it's sort of a let's start talking about it in 25 and then we'll come back to it later. I don't know, because I think one of the other questions is how much is the budget discussion in particular going to overwhelm other things that people would maybe like to do, but you know, it's a bandwidth question.
Yeah.
But be aware of that point. Go ahead.
Yeah, and then we'll try to, working with Don, make sure that we keep you up to date on some of these legislative proposals as well as hearing dates. I think on the Senate side, on the House side, it's Corman. On the Senate side, I think it's Senator McCray. That's the sponsor for the Senate side for that bill.
That's right.
I'll say that was definitely why it was important to ask the question to Shana, because it's on the forefront of, you know, our thought as well, because we don't meet again until March. We're gonna be knee deep in session. So I don't want it to get past us and then all the work that we put into this is gone by the wayside. If there's not an appetite for it, or if there is an appetite for it, it would be beneficial for the commission to know that the governor's office is taking a position or is thinking a certain way in terms of what we've been working on as a commission rather hard.
Yeah.
So
I'll commit to working, having my team work in close coordination with Don to make sure that as those things, particularly those that affect Baltimore region or particularly MTA, if they come up, then we're working with you to make sure that we give you as much information as quickly as possible, so that the commission does want to make recommendations or letters of support or interest or however you want to do it, there's an opportunity for you to do that as well.
I would just say on this one subject, because I've spent more time on it perhaps than some others have, you know, without getting deep into it, I would be opposed to sort of taking Mark out of MTA as a sort of incremental, you know, a one-off step, I guess is the way I would say it. And I know I have a lot of respect for Delegate Corman and Senator McCray. I understand some of the motivation behind that. I understand why, you know, the DC area might be, but I think this conversation needs to be had in a much more holistic way. I don't actually know what the outcome should be, and we published this study. I'm still not sure I know exactly what the outcome should be. I don't think the outcome is, gee, let's take Mark out of MTA and then sort of we'll figure the rest out later. So I would just say that to you as the department's representative. Obviously, we're not the legislature, we're not the governor, but I think we want to be kept in that loop because we've invested time and effort in this study for a real conversation about what the appropriate structure is. And like I said, I mean, there's status quo, there's a holistic review, then there's sort of like one-off. And I'm not comfortable with the idea of doing it in that way.
I am not either, and I'm gonna tell you why. It's a slightly different reason, but it supports what you just said. I think it's another example because for many, many years, there are people that didn't even recognize that Mark was part of MTA, is part of MTA, a very key component of MTA. It is viewed very differently for various reasons, and I would say one of them is another example of treating services in that region, right? People are principally traveling from here to the Washington DC area. And so it seems very much like a red versus purple and a host of other things, and WMATA as well. And so I would put it in that bucket in a really big way, right? So I think for many years, it's been segmented and looked at differently because of the population that may use those services and where they're traveling to. So that's a much global issue that we need to be looking at, also in relationship to the way appropriations are conducted for WMATA. So I'll put it in that bucket too.
Thank you.
I would also echo that the one-off approach, I would be highly concerned. I'll slice it a slightly different way, so there's many talking points. I think fundamentally, MTA structure has had deficits and deferred investment for decades. And to peel it apart before it can get back on track and say it has to generate its own revenue when it's already starting from way behind, fundamentally does not follow economic or business principles. And so I think that if we're going to do it, I just want to echo that it's a holistic view because a lot of pieces and levers would have to move simultaneously. So I would also echo that and the commission's participation, or at least an opportunity to engage.
And if we're doing that, let's develop comprehensive criteria for evaluating such things, right? It does seem just very odd that they would just pluck that out to review. And like you, I'm a key supporter of her as well.
I don't want to get too ahead of the legislation, especially if it hasn't been proposed just yet. I mean, we know of the fact that it is something that's been out there. And so if it's, if it gets to the point of being legislated, then, your voices are definitely going to be key to us figuring out what it needs to be for the future. And so once that does happen, we will definitely keep you informed of where we are in the process. And if you want to lend your voices, whether it's in writing a letter, supporting through a hearing, that opportunity is available.
Thank you. Okay, anything else for Tony? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm sure Don's like, I don't know what's coming next. What's next? But what I was thinking, I'll just throw this out there for Don. I was thinking that we would actually go back to the annual report conversation because I'd like to hear from the commission, and I'm afraid that if we push that to the end, it'll get squished. So what I'm thinking, Don, for your approval, is we go back to the annual report and sort of commission a discussion around it and priorities, and then we would move to the two things untouched, which would be the MRT, I always forget which acronym to use, but the regional transit plan, and then the transit authority study. Does that make rational sense, Don? Go back up to that, is that okay?
Yes, sure.
So let's go back to that. And the annual report, the idea here is not to rehash the annual report, which I read again before today's meeting, and I have to say, I was very satisfied with the way it represented the work that we had done. I think it continues to highlight the important issues in a realistic way. I think it is appropriately complimentary of MTA and the work they're doing and recognizes the issue is much more a resource issue than a, sort of management or people issue. All of which I think is the case. I will say that, and I'd like to hear your thoughts about this. The only thing, and I'll sort of open the bidding on this with this comment, the only thing that I was a little bit disappointed in last year is that I don't think that the work groups got the traction that they needed to start really thinking, become sort of almost subject matter experts, people digging into the thing that interested them on those work groups. There are now 4, including Lots, which I think is maybe meeting today. And if we're gonna go to it every other month, which I think is fine, unless we revisit that. One of the reasons for that was to give the work groups more time in between to do some work and to report back and not have you feel like you've got a monthly meeting and this and that and so on, to be fair, to your time. So one of my priorities for this year is to get those work groups fully, functioning with some cadence, and some reporting and some productive direction, outcome and recommendations so that the commission can then take that, and chew on it, sort of think of it as like, committee reports back to the commission sort of concept, which I think everybody's sort of familiar with from one or another thing that we do. So that's the one thing that I programmatically, the last year, there was enormous amount of ramping up and getting to know the issues and MTA and each other and the landscape. We're now a year more mature, we're not gonna have to do that. And frankly, I don't know that there's gonna be that much budget discussion right away because there's gonna be a budget and we're gonna have to figure out what happens but I think that, we've made our points known along with others on the budget, and while we're not gonna say, all right, budgets, we're done talking about the budget, I do think the budget starts to fall in line with other more programmatic things. And this year in 24, I should say last year, we just became obsessed with the budget, and correctly so, because it was really the superseding issue. So we've got to keep that in there, but I do want the groups to really start working on their respective areas harder, more detailed, because I think that ultimately that will be beneficial to MTA. It's consistent with our statutory charge and responsibility to look at those things. And that would be my one sort of here's my reflection. Other than that, you guys are great, and the work that got done last year, and I think although ultimately, of course, at the end of the day, the budget outcome is to the governor's credit because it's his budget. I think it takes a village, and it was very helpful to have the commission along with many others weigh in. And I think that we should be pleased to have been on the scene and hopefully had some influence on the kind of ecosystem for this that led to this result. Although, of course, as I said, the decision really ultimately is the governor's, and he deserves credit for making the budget what it is. So I'll just start with that. Don, I don't know if did you have something in particular you wanted to add to that or frame, or should we just ask people to reflect on some of the questions that we send out in advance?
I was just gonna say that there was a mad dash at the end to try and pull the annual report together. So I appreciate your indulgence in letting us kind of run with that and do that. It's very difficult to write these kinds of things by commission, so I hope what you ended up seeing is something you feel good about.
Yeah, and Don, thanks. This seems sort of, here we are. Thank you for everything that you did. I think we've said this before, but obviously you're the glue that's keeping this together. So thank you for your work on the report and everywhere else. But okay, so I'd like to just go around, but I don't want to make everybody. What I'd like to hear, and we'll keep this tight. I want this to be sort of 15-20 minutes tops. Just like let's sort of see what people have to say about last year. What do you think we might do differently? Annual report. You get the idea. And we sent you some questions in advance. So who would like to go first? Otherwise, I'm just going to start at one end and. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chair, question for you. Yes, gets into some one. I'll delve into the report, but yeah. Is there an opportunity? Are we thinking about maybe a lobby day or something like that for this commission down in Annapolis. I know we don't meet again until March, which is in a thicker session, but if folks were interested, I mean, I'm happy to work with you and see if we can come up with a day and schedule and, you know, like to one, do some of the thanking, and then the advocacy for protecting these funds that were replaced.
Any reflections on that, thoughts, Lester, suggestions? People have,
That's a good idea.
okay, well, thank you.
I'll work with you on
I
that.
appreciate that.
And then for the report, I mean, I agree with you 100%. I think kudos to the commissioners, kudos to the support staff. A lot of work packed into a short period of time. I think an incredible start to year one, a ramp up of this commission. I think we got something to build on for the committee work and some other advocacy. And then I think some real wins coming out of this. How do you analyze something, advocate for it, and then get some pieces put back in? To your point, you know, great work, the ecosystem did great work, partner as well. But all in all, proud to be a part of the commission. I think a good setup for where we go in the year, so we got something to build on and kind of grow. So I appreciate the work.
Good. Others? Not required, but I'd love to hear from you. Tony.
I do agree with you. I think for the subgroup, subcommittees, for the rider experience group, we had a really good first meeting, I want to say, where we received education from the MTA and their team, and that was incredibly helpful, but we haven't kind of had time as a committee to kind of dive in and decide what we want to look at and how we want to do that. So maybe on alternating months, I think it would be a great idea to set up those meetings as well.
You will go?
Oh, mine is quick and easy.
All right.
One, I would like to salute you for your leadership and advancing us positively forward from last year. And I think because of your framing, we were able to achieve a lot. And I'll say ditto and ditto.
That's very kind. Thank you very much.
I would add, I think I would agree with everything that has been said, as well as the thank yous. In the interest of time, I won't say them all again. I think the mechanism is the work group, but I do want to say that the inaugural year, I mean, standing something up from scratch takes a lot of foundation and education. So I think what we have done has made complete sense. I think there is a opportunity for a real pivot to have more direct impact on the agency, not to lose sight of the advocacy in the budget. But, and I think the work groups are set up for that, but it really, you know, from the early days, I feel like we have some clear pinpoints of moving the needle around procurement, moving the needle around staffing are operationally gonna have significant impacts. And I think making sure that as we evolve forward, we get that more specificity on actionable items, I think would be of value to the agency. I would hope.
Yeah, thanks. How does the agency feel about it?
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
No, and I think the staffing report, Don, Jake are working on that. I think it's close. Good thing work that's been done. And it does tie into larger conversations as well, right? Procurement reform and discussion. I mean, Governor Moore at the BPW meeting, one of the recent ones, I don't remember which one, did acknowledge that procurement in Maryland is not working. And there's some opportunities for reform. So I think, you know, following along that kind of larger picture, there's opportunities there. Right.
I don't really
Yes.
I don't have much to add. I just like to thank everyone for their work. And I know a lot of it has fallen on, you know, our chairs and BMC. I think one thing maybe would be, you know, we have these different charges of the different plans that we need to review. And just thinking about like the timeline that we're given to be able to substantially review things and comment in a way that's meaningful. Maybe we want to think about, is it all working out? And if some things need to be changed in terms of when we get things and how long we have to make comments.
We will have, and we'll get, I mean, we are gonna have, we have two sort of very specific chunks, big chunks this year that are at the commission level. One is the RTP, which you're gonna hear about in a few moments, and the other is the updated capital needs inventory. Those are two really big things. And they're substantive and they're gonna inform us, and I think we're gonna be able to participate. So we didn't really have those last year because they both happened to be 2025 items, not 2024 items. So they're gonna be here whether we, they're gonna be here, right? So I think that will provide a certain amount of our commission level work plan, which is also why I'm very focused on having the work groups do their thing so that we can find the right balance between the sort of plenary commission and the work groups.
I agree with everything that's been said. Diving a little deeper into our work groups as we get to, more steam and more traction into it to come up with some voice, some ideas in time to bring our thoughts forward. And I think, after this first year, I think we found our footing, finding our voice and how we want to project. I think it'll really take on a better, more meaningful shape.
I will resend it, I guess, if it's helpful, but I mean, it's worth, I try and go back and look at the statutory charge regularly. Because we are charged with making recommendations, I mean, they don't exactly have to do what we say, but we are charged with making recommendations. And I think, again, I'm trying as we mature as we feel like we have a stronger foundation to be able to say, all right, we thought about this, we hear you, we now feel more comfortable with the subject matter. We're gonna start making some recommendations, some more specific things, which is what I think the work groups can sort of do in addition to the broader stuff about the various plans that I just talked about. And we'll either resend that or we'll tell you where to find it. It's worth looking at to appreciate what the scope of what we're supposed to be doing actually is. Okay. Don?
Commissioner Van Andel would like to say something. He's online, so can you unmute him?
Yep, thank you. Yeah, one additional remark. I think what I really liked about last year is just getting a better understanding about like how MTA is organized and specifically also funded, and also understanding the complexity with this. And I hope that the work that we can be doing, and especially as Mr. Larry is saying, that we can make recommendations that we can get to a situation where there will be a more sustainable long-term future and funding in place for MTA, because I feel like the way it is now is not really sustainable. So for that matter, I'm very hopeful that we can continue that work that will lead to better operation opportunities for MTA.
Thank you. Art, oh yes, Louis, sorry.
I think one opportunity for improvement next year is that a lot of the work that this commission has done,
you speak on just
on the outside, can seem a little dry and insular. And one consistent piece of feedback that I've heard from transit advocates in this region is the question, what are you guys doing? Like, how come I don't hear about it? And there's a gulf between like the tremendous amount of work that takes place here and all the dry things that have to go into commenting on legislation and so forth. I think that it's missing a connection to a lot of the people that care about the questions that are being addressed here. So I think that's an opportunity for improvement, because I think many people find that this work is unintentionally taking place in a silo, or they're not finding out about it. And even right now, most people are at work. They're maybe not logged in here, like the 20 or 30 people that might be really connected to these questions and have the time and the ability to. So that's, I think, in year 2 of this commission, what I'd like to see is, how do we use this, which is how most people are getting their news? How do we use this to see visibly the work of this commission that's not just coming out in like an op-ed or in a published paper? I think there's opportunities to innovate there and better tell our story in the way that people are accustomed to hearing stories, especially from the MTA, which uses all sorts of social media to connect with all their writers. They're not putting out, articles in the Sun. Like, they're using social media to be like, hey, these are our updates, this is our changes. We're highlighting success of our staff. We're telling stories about what's not working. We don't do that yet. And I think there's a chance for us to do that so more folks understand what's happening here and why it's important, and more importantly, effective.
It's very helpful, thanks.
Yeah, just to pivot on that, I think that's exactly right. And in fact, that also helps enhance the advocacy element of our charge. Because that's part of the voice that we can build to then, we're ready to advocate on behalf of key issues and initiatives. That's a platform that we can use. So we begin to mature that, build the following, build a presence. To That's absolutely. Just wanna make that. Thanks.
So for this year, we're looking for a communications and messaging plan and engagement, right? Better efforts towards that. Is that what you're saying?
I am.
And making sure that people can inform the process.
I am, and I'm also saying we don't have to reinvent that wheel. I think there's a lot of
No.
people that we can partner with that have really mature communications
We
that
can use our
say,
resources.
hey,
Mhm.
can we be a mouthpiece of your story? Because we already have 7,000 people that follow us and we're in the same sandbox. So rather than us have to prop up something from scratch, there's a lot of mature partners in the transit space that can help promote what we're doing in concert with what they're doing in this.
Thank you. Very good. Okay, well, I'm happy to close this out. If anybody, certainly don't wanna cut anybody off. Great, this is really helpful. Thank you very much for a nice, concise set of thoughts and recommendations, which we will certainly figure out how to incorporate and so terrific. The remaining two items on the agenda, believe it or not, although maybe not in this order originally, are the Central Maryland Regional Transit Plan and the RTA study report. Don, are we gonna do the RTP first, since that was actually first on the agenda? Is that, okay? So, and we have, who's doing that for MTA?
Albert.
Don't be fooled by my burgundy sweater.
No, we like them too. There's something. We're not, it's not a problem yet. It's really not. We were so happy that, you know, because they were so depressed for so long, you know, down our friends in the DC area, so good for them.
For those of you who have not met me, my name is Albert Guiney-Engel. I'm an MTA Office of Baltimore Regional Planning. I am going to be the project manager for the 2025 update of the regional transit plan. We have some of our staff in the room. Jacob Youngblood is my deputy project manager.
Jacob.
And of course, I want to recognize the great support that we've gotten from Holly and from Kate and Liz, who's not here today, for their team to support us as we've been working on this plan. A lot of work on our side. You know, there's a lot of work for this group to meet as well. Happy to be here. This is the beginning of a conversation that's going to be going on all year long. So I want to get us off right, but we do have a lot to get through today on this presentation, and I know everyone wants to get to the Transit Authority study as well, the last agenda item. So I'm going to try and keep moving, but we will have some points in the presentation to pause for discussion if there's interest from the commission. So just an overview, what we want to go through today. Liz gave a quick update back in November that we would be embarking on the update to the RTP, but today we're kicking off in earnest. So we have three objectives. One, we want to orient you all to the contents of the previous regional transit plan, specifically process and participation, objectives and strategies, and of course the corridors. We do want to hopefully get the BRTC's input on a few key questions as we're starting our plan development. And we're going to lay out the schedule and the next steps that we see for this plan. So we're going to start by taking a look back at the 2020 RTP. This is it. I don't know if you all have a copy of it or have seen it before, but if you haven't, we can have it sent out to you. If you want a hard copy, we can send it. You can also go to rtp.mta.gov, click read the plan, and you can get it in there. So this plan was mandated by law that was passed in 2018, developed over 2019 to 2020. And the law intended for it to lay out a 25-year vision for public transportation in the Central Maryland region, identify ways to improve existing MTA transit, better coordinate transit region-wide and across providers, and show the places and corridors that would most benefit from new infrastructure investments. And then finally, provide an opportunity to coordinate transit planning with local land use and other statewide transportation and planning efforts. One thing to think about as you are considering the RTP update and some of the questions we'll talk about today, and if you want to take time to familiarize yourself with the previous RTP before you think about this, is how well did the previous RTP do at filling out this vision, fulfilling the vision from the law? The previous RTP was produced very collaboratively. We had the commission, Regional Transit Plan Commission. Those meetings meaningfully informed the plan goals and objectives and methodologies. Locally operated transit services, MTA, local government agencies were involved regularly, and they remained engaged through the RTPI team, implementation team that we've been meeting with them with. And we had extensive public engagement back in the 2019 timeframe, and that informed both the priorities of the plan and also how we went about putting it together. You can see some of the stats on how many engagement efforts that we undertook in that time. That really set a durable baseline for our understanding of the public's vision for transit in the region, and that is really, continuing to inform us to this day, what we heard back at that time. So that RTP had 3 broad goals, which were optimize existing services, plan for their integration into future services, and enhance fiscal sustainability. And those 3 goals were associated with 6 key objectives, which were the main organizing function of the plan. Those are on the slide: provide faster, more reliable service, grow ridership, increase access to jobs and opportunities, improve the customer experience, be equitable, and prepare for the future. Each of the objectives had strategies for its implementation. We have actually made, there's 130 total strategies in the whole document. It had a 5-year implementation plan that included 34 strategies to start on in the first 5 years. Of those 34, we've made progress on all of them. 7 are completed, others in progress or sort of continual commitments. An example of a continual commitment would be, one of the strategies was enhance the cleanliness of station stops and vehicles using appropriate sanitation protocols. That's something we're gonna do and continue to do. We're never gonna stop doing that. So I would encourage you, as you read through the plan, consider whether changing conditions or shifting priorities or progress on parallel efforts mean that we should be considering additional strategies. MTA staff is gonna do the same. That's gonna be a topic of discussion at a further meeting. So I don't wanna dwell on it today.
There is you just pointed out an important distinction, which is they have to be susceptible to completion in order to go in that bucket, right? So the real measuring stick is, of the ones that were supposed to be completed, did we complete them? Because as you say, cleaning is a lifetime commitment.
But if you remember when we published this October of 2020, we were in the thick of COVID.
Yeah,
So I think
yeah.
that, like, some of the things made it in there.
Right, yeah.
And that's what we mean by changing conditions.
Okay, sorry.
Please. So just, this is gonna be our first break for discussion and question. I don't wanna take too long because I wanna keep us moving, but as you look back on the 2020 plan and you look at these, is anything no longer relevant, or is there anything important missing? I just wanna open the floor for a couple minutes for immediate thoughts on those questions.
Connection points to the different SPGs and agencies, and we'll push that information out to you as it makes sense throughout the week.
You're not muted, there you
Well, we have also put together an
There it is. Thank you.
So, is anything missing, anything no longer relevant or, need to be shifted? Interested in hearing. If you need more time to look through, we're happy to defer this conversation to future meetings.
I know I do need more time, which doesn't mean we shouldn't talk about it today. Because I guess one of my questions looking at those 6 is it rider customer facing? Is it internal looking? Because a lot of the things that we have a rider experience work group, which is obviously rider focused. We also have a project delivery and procurement work group, which is focused through the ride. It's not really a rider thing, except that in the sense that they'll eventually benefit from things that we deliver. So can you help frame that a little bit?
I mean,
is that a fair question?
Yeah, and I think these are intended to be both. Obviously, customer experience is one of these objectives, and it's the ultimate goal of all of this service that we attempt, providing. In order to do that, internal processes are a lot of the way that we're doing. So things like, just to go back to the example of the cleanliness of stations, that's an immediate customer experience thing to focus on doing, but in order to ramp up our ability to do so, we need to make sure we have the contracts in place to do that, which takes a look at procurement, we need to make sure we're thinking about how things are getting reported back and those type of processes. So it's both.
All right, well, please, yeah, go ahead, Aaron.
Words matter, but I'd love to have the word modern, more modern, reliable service. I mean, I think that this, helps us as we look at building a future program and making sure that we're modernizing it as we do so.
I have one other thought that, I think is probably captured here, but I think the evolution of how we're talking about it, and I think some of the work we've done on the commission is reflected in the approach that MDOT and the governor is taking. I think increased access to jobs and opportunities, it probably lives there, but really the orientation of transit's role in economic opportunity connection and economic mobility and ultimately economic development. All those pieces, I think that language and making sure people understand that, like I see the icon says jobs, but I think being a lot more direct about that this next time would be really valuable.
Yeah, and that actually was a big topic of conversation. The first time there was even discussion, should economic development be one of those 3 goals? And ultimately that commission decided not to. But I think that's a very appropriate thing for us to be thinking about as we're working on the update. Looks like we have a raised hand. Go ahead.
Can't hear you, Ariane.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, it's the headset here. Sorry about that. The point that I wanted to make is probably it already fits within the faster and more reliable service, but also the specifically for the RTP, the integrated matter of the transportation, that is like an integrated solution between the different systems with different payment applications and potentially different providers, and seeing like, hey, how can riders really have one seamless experience across the different areas that are basically being served. So that I think is important. Maybe that's already part of those 6 metrics, of course, but maybe it can be more visible.
Yeah, some of the strategies did specifically address that, but I think that's important to highlight as a high level thing to focus on.
Yeah, if I would just add, looking back at like the intent of the RTP as it relates to like the planning efforts that are happening in the region, maybe there's an opportunity to explicitly call that out in one of the objectives, because as we have these budget discussions and stuff, really thinking about transit as it competes, frankly, with other modes is a big part of that discussion.
Okay, yeah. Any other thoughts before we progress?
Let's progress.
Okay. So I want to move on to just talk a little bit about corridors, both what they were in the previous RTP and how we're thinking about updating them, what's happened since then and how we're thinking about updating them. So the law passed in 2018 required the RTP to prioritize corridors for planning of new public transportation assets. So the 2020 RTP planning process spent a lot of time and effort identifying possible transit corridors. They were identified through multiple inputs, including analysis of current expected travel demand, land uses, transit propensity, existing services, stakeholder discussions, and existing plans, and of course, refinement by the RTP Commission. One thing that's important to keep in mind with the corridors in the current RTP, and we'll look at a map shortly, is they were not prescriptive of a particular mode or level or type of service or even specific destination endpoints. So they represent corridors where there's a mismatch between the amount of service that's supplied and transit demand. So for example, corridor with moderate demand but low to no existing transit could be served by frequent bus. If you have high demand, but existing moderate levels of existing transit, that would still also be a corridor. So that example, that would be red line corridor. So this is the map that was produced by the 2020 RTP, if you're not familiar with it. As you can see, there are 30 corridors. They stretch as far north as Perryville, as far west as Clarksville, as far south as DC, as far east as Annapolis. The previous commission had a very sort of expansive vision, and we think there's an opportunity to be more focused this time around, sort of zero in on the highest priority corridors through the prioritization exercises and work that we're going to be doing. One of the things we learned doing corridor studies over the last 5 years is that there are a lot of drawbacks to having this many corridors. All of the corridor studies that we have done, north-south and east-west corridors, that Eastern Baltimore County access study we're working on now, have involved consolidating multiple corridors. And all of that experience leads us to feel that there's an opportunity to be more focused here. Basically, every early opportunity corridor from the previous RTP has done some type of planning or analysis. I'm not going to read through each and every one of these, but you can see that many of the recent significant MTA corridor development efforts have occurred along corridors that are identified in the RTP, including the Red Line, including the Raise East West project, including the Flash BRT along US 29, which is important efforts that we're moving along, and we're proud of at MTA. With that background, I'm going to give an overview of how our planning staff will be analyzing the data to inform the corridors aspect of the RTP update. This is the position we're starting from, but we will be interested and we'll pause in a little bit to get this body's input on how we should be thinking about it and if there are other things that we need to be considering. So there are kind of two main pieces: transit demand analysis and service allocation analysis. Transit demand analysis is underway, so we're going to start talking about this today in a little more detail. It's going to provide an overview of transit demand and travel patterns, update the previous analysis and check to see if the future travel projections are still accurate. We're going to use BMC data to identify travel patterns likely to experience the greatest change, and we'll update our mapping to identify reflect up-to-date transit supportive areas. And then we're also going to update our previous analysis of ridership trends. Obviously, a lot has changed over the last 5 years in that respect. Productivity metrics, current weekday peak and off-peak ridership, and sort of with a focus on origin and destination pairs with the best current transit performance, and origin and destination pairs with the potential for improvement, enhancement, and expansion. The goal is, and you'll see this question underneath the transit demand analysis bubble, to develop a future-minded vision of regional transit demand to inform long-term planning. And that's encapsulated by that question: where, when, and how often should transit operate? We haven't yet begun the service allocation analysis, so we'll dig into it next time that we come here, but I want to give an overview so you can understand what we're proposing to do and potentially weigh in with your thoughts. So that's going to be, we're going to be using current transit service data that we have from around the region, MTA, and other providers, as well as the analysis we've done for the Be More Bus Plan to identify service gaps and opportunities to align service with demands and trends. It's going to include all operators of transit, all modes, and key coverage metrics across the region. And that side of the equation aims to answer that question at the bottom: where, when, and how often does transit currently operate? Which, believe it or not, we need to refresh ourselves on even as MTA. The service that we don't directly operate, we need to make sure that we are fully adequately considering throughout this plan, because this is a regional transit plan. It's not just a transit plan for MTA. And then sort of finally, the transit market analysis is going to marry those two pieces to answer those questions at the right: how well does current transit serve the demand, and what places and time periods need new or more transit service? I'm going to show some example data that can inform the market and demand analysis. There's a lot more out there, and we're not going to go through all of it today, but hopefully this will get your creative juices flowing a little bit as we think about some of the big questions about what types of data that we want to look at. So in the big picture, we started by hypothesizing that the overall geography of transit demand has not changed too much since 2020. Obviously, we endured this convulsive event of the pandemic, but spatially thinking and geographically thinking, the corridors or the places where transit-oriented populations tend to be are pretty similar to the way they were in 2020. These two maps reflect that. We updated our analysis methodology a little bit, so the display is a little bit different between the 2020 display on the left and the 2024 display on the right. But this analysis really shows where transit-oriented populations, meaning people who are most likely to use transit, where those trips are most likely to originate based on the factors that are shown on the slide. As you can see, the geography is basically the same. There are a few subtle changes that if you really squint, you can see. But we're interpreting this to mean that in the big picture, the geography is pretty similar. Here's another example type. These are comparisons to 2045 projected employment from BMC. So we've just the display a little bit, but we find areas of growth throughout the region. And similarly to the sort of demographic analysis, these are all of the areas of growth that we see on this map are along corridors that were in the previous RTP. So they don't reveal any sort of growth locations that were not in that plan, but this is the type of data that will inform the prioritization and phasing aspects of the regional transit plan update. Just as example of the other data types that I mentioned, previous analysis 2020 considered density and growth of population, employment, other destinations, travel flows for work and non-work trips, and of course, existing transit frequency, span of service, ridership growth trends. And this is, the next pause point where I want to hear from you all. Are there additional factors that we should consider while giving the corridors a fresh look? And I want to take a few minutes to talk about that before we wrap up with some homework for you all.
Once again,
I would say the transit flows for work and non-work trips is important, but I guess my question is, have you all taken into consideration express service within the region? For example, if you're in Towson and want to go to White Marsh for work, express service in the morning, express service in the evening, have you all taken into consideration those needs versus just regular bus routes that we have more express routes?
I think that's an exact example of the travel flows for work and non-work trips that we're going to be looking at. The short answer is we're not there yet in terms of mode and service type. That's also something that we have been thinking about through the Be More Bus Plan on a slightly separate effort. But that's what that travel flows means. And we'll think about what's the best match between the level of demand and the sort of potential service mode and amount of service that could pair that origin and destination.
So then my follow-up question is, all of the jurisdictions are required to do a 5-year study on services and the recommendations from the residents. And that was one that was done in Baltimore County, and one of the largest, that was at the top of the recommendations from the local jurisdiction. Do you all take that into consideration as well as a part of?
You're referring to the TD, the local transit development plans? Yes, those are. And in fact, we've already started reviewing those, and we're making sure that we're aligning the RTP with those efforts. If you think back to early on, one of the bullets about what the plan is supposed to do is align the regional transit vision with other transition planning efforts, and that's an exact example of that. A couple of raised hand questions on the slides. I don't know.
Aaron? Oh, I'm sorry, we got some, let's do Aaron, and then we'll go to the.
Just building on that, is this where it would make sense to kind of explore the bus rapid transit, kind of option, like building that in? It's like we're trying to really bring BRT a little more to the forefront and some of the planning and opportunity identification.
I mean, we'll get there as part of the mode feasibility assessment, which one of the next sort of section of the presentation before we wrap up is the schedule for what we'd like to do over the course of the next year to get this plan, really 10 months to get this plan done in time. So you'll see that we have a section about mode, and we'll get to that question then. But I think, yeah, these are the type of questions that we need to be, and data that we need to be collecting and analyzing in order to be able to tell us, is BRT potentially the right mode for a particular corridor? Or is Express Bus potentially the right mode for a particular corridor? Thank you.
Sorry, Don, we got Brandon and then.
Thank you. Yeah, one remark, also a question from my end. You look at existing transit ridership and growth trends, which is of course very helpful. On the other hand, though, for Anne Arundel County specifically, the ridership has been growing, but it's still, I would say, relatively low. So is the ridership taking a role in the analysis to that matter? Because I think sometimes the ridership, when it's low, it doesn't really say a lot, because there might be a lot more opportunity. Just because the services are not there, you don't really see it. So just want to make that point.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit like a chicken and egg problem.
Right, exactly.
Referring to, and so yes, existing ridership and growth trends are going to be part of the analysis, but they are not by any means the end all and be all of the analysis.
Eric, am I calling folks Eric?
Yeah, hi, thank you. Appreciate the presentation. My name is Eric Lang. I'm Transportation Development Officer with the West North Avenue Development Authority, an independent state authority working in one of your early opportunity corridors, the Walbrook to Berea or North Avenue corridor. And I'm curious to see how maybe some of this analysis could kind of overlap with this type of an investment, which is only a couple of years, started in 2021. So maybe there's a way to kind of look forward and see how this investment in the corridor can also work to catalyze a lot of these, maybe kind of back-looking trends, but to support economic development and catalyze that development in the corridor. So just wanted to plant that seed.
All right, yeah, thanks. I'm writing that down.
That's it for hands online, as far as I know. See, anybody else in the room?
Curiosity.
Yeah, Scott.
I'm sorry, I missed the beginning of the presentation, so you may have already said this, but I'm just curious whether this includes commute shed. Where the analysis actually includes commute shed, that would be reasonable to people riding transit.
Yeah, I think, I don't think we put it exactly those terms, but I'm gonna make sure that we incorporate that. Anything else before we proceed?
Keep going.
Okay. So just to give a little bit of a roadmap ahead, we have a very aggressive schedule that we want to keep to meet the legal deadline of October 1st for us to be finishing this plan. So I want to lay out how we're planning to meet that deadline and some of the benchmarks that we need to meet along the way in order to make sure we're on track. So right now, winter, we're working in this documenting progress in RTP strategies and corridors and updating the transit market and demand analysis. Once we get into the spring, that's when we'll get into this confirm and prioritize RTP corridors and assess the modal feasibility. With summer, we would go into that phasing question. And that's also when we'll dig back into the strategies and then start drafting an updated RTP document, which we will finalize in the fall. We'll present the finalized plan to BRTC for their approval and of course, publish the adopted plan. We've identified when the current 6 scheduled BRTC meetings are along this schedule. Obviously, that's subject to change. And this slide, I'm not gonna go over each and every one of these, but this is sort of where our head is now about what we want to be talking about at each one of these meetings in order to make sure that we're able to get a complete plan to you before October 1st. That's when it's due for us to submit to you, to the legislature, and then this body can review it, approve it, and I guess our understanding is that you will report your approval in your annual report at the end of the year to say, yes, we reviewed this and approved it. That's our understanding of what the law requires us and you to do. Obviously, if BRTC changes your schedule, the dates are subject to change, and we'll work with you to make sure that what we're presenting is up to date for us, but also useful to you. Also, the BRTC has their sixth meeting is November 7th, so the October date is not quite right, but that's where we would, I guess, deliberate and decide whether to approve the plan. You deliberate and decide whether to approve the plan in November.
The October 1st is the date, I'm sorry.
So we don't have an October meeting.
Exactly.
Well, I'm sorry, the October 1st date it's due to whom by then?
October date is when we must submit it to you and to General Assembly. And then we can't crimp the amount of time that it takes you to, consider it and approve it. And if you wanted to make additional updates or changes and submit it as the BRTC version, we'll figure out how that works.
So what's the General Assembly's role in, they just receive it or
They
receive it?
receive it, it's advisory to them. The law requires that they're a recipient of the plan, basically.
So just as a reminder, there's two separate laws here. So one is the law that requires MTA to do the BRTC or the
Regional
RTP, sorry, too many acronyms, and update it every 5 years.
Right.
And then the separate law that requires you guys to approve it. So the law that we go by for requiring to do it requires it to be published and sent to a whole variety of groups, including the General Assembly by October 1st.
Well, it doesn't make any sense to submit it to everybody and then for us to come along afterwards and approve it, because unless we're just gonna rubber stamp, I mean, it's a little weird, right? Shouldn't we try and get to the point where we're done with our work by the time it's due, if that's possible?
I'd like to think that we can do that, but if we get to a point where it's October 1st and we feel like we have a finished product, but it's not satisfactory to you, I think we're gonna go ahead and submit it as, this is MTA's, staff recommendation for what the plan is, and, this is our understanding of it. And, any further changes, we can make after that date, and that would be the approved version that you approve. This is new, this is the first time that this is being done, so it's new law, so to speak, and we'll navigate it together.
Yeah, I mean, let's just assume that we're gonna try and get the two lines that converge,
Yes,
right?
I would love for us to meet on September 5th, and we have a draft plan. We come to you, we come to a consensus on what, and if any changes need to be made, we sign off on them, and you vote to approve on September 5th. That's plan A and
So
preferred.
for me, it's a bit abstract for me to respond to that, but yes, that sounds like a good idea. The non-abstract thing is, I'm fairly certain that we're gonna have to move the September 5th meeting, not materially, but to some other date, because I think there's a conflict on the 5th. So I'm just taking a detour on schedule to say, I've asked the staff to send out proper Outlook requests, so it's not, you don't have to, I mean, some people just put these things in, but it'd be better to have an Outlook request. So we're gonna send those, but heads up that we have to find another date in September. We'll try and factor this in so it doesn't mess things up. Yeah, maybe lose a week. It's not gonna be a giant.
Yeah, I mean, I would say from our perspective, the later in September that you're able to get, the more time that gives us to work, which might be more conducive to us having a final plan.
Maybe it'll be a win-win then, we'll sort of see. But anyway, so commission, please expect Outlook requests for these dates so that they're actually on your calendar. And anticipate the fact that we're probably gonna move, and hopefully, at this point, people are either you're flexible about September or you've got something that you're never gonna move because it's in September and you're gonna be out of the country or something, so we'll do the best we can. Okay.
Hey, Ariane does have his hand raised.
Ariane, go ahead, thank you.
So.
I just have one, I forgot one more factor to include.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Shift analysis. I mean, time of day. I mean, as logistics grows as a sector of the economy, three shift, transit is necessary.
Yes, and that's one of the areas where I think we have seen the biggest change since 2020.
Yeah.
The geography hasn't changed, but the time of day that we're seeing peak demand has changed. And so we're definitely gonna incorporate that. So just in terms of our next steps on MTA side, we're gonna be refining the results of the market and demand analysis update, incorporating a lot of the factors that we've talked about, and hopefully be able to get into that corridor confirmation and prioritization work. We're gonna incorporate the input that you gave us today, and our next meeting, your next meeting in March, we will present the final results of that market demand analysis, introduce the corridor confirmation and prioritization, and sort of solicit feedback on the approach that we wanna take to that mode suitability assessment. We haven't really worked out exactly yet what we think is best, based on what we hear from the market demand analysis. So we'll present our plan to do that and wanna hear from you all, whether that makes sense. How are we doing on time?
We're about out of time.
Okay, so then this can be a prompt for you to think about for next time. And as you review the RTP, which we'll make sure is sent out to you, is there anything that you hoped to see in the 2020 RTP that is not in there that should be considered for addition in the update? And, you know, harken back to what was in the law required for the RTP. And looking forward to continuing to hear from you. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. And any of the MTA folks that you're used to corresponding with, getting in touch with me.
So I want to thank you for truly an excellent, crisp, well-organized presentation. This is really well done and very helpful. I think you have to assume that people have not read the 2020 plan, or at least some people have not read it. So I think what we need to do is, with Don, we need to figure out how to make sure people see the plan and that you give them homework, give us homework, right? So incorporate all this. Please read the attached plan and please think about these following things, which, you know, we talked about at the meeting, but please think about it. And then however you want to solicit that feedback, you can ask for it in real time, like, please let us know right now if you have any thoughts. You can say, please let it, whatever you think is the process.
Right. I don't want to
think
run
you need
afoul of, you know, open meetings and stuff with other correspondents, but we'll figure out a way to do it.
Yeah, you'll figure it out.
Okay.
Great. Thank you very much. Really good job.
Thanks.
So we're going to transition to, I hope, a fairly brief presentation about the RTA study. I think we're doing this because I want to make sure everybody see, you know, we have a chance to see the final kind of presentation. We've seen it, everybody's read it, there's nothing really new in it. I think it's evolved in terms of sort of just formatting and sort of organization. So we'll do that and tell us, you know, how do we want to do that, Tom?
Bethany is online here and she
Hello, Bethany.
got the control
everyone.
slide, so.
So Bethany, I just ask you, I mean, we're a little short on time and I think, you know how much we've heard about this, and talked about it previously. So if you could sort of, you know, if you can sort of conform your remarks to that framework, that'd be great.
Absolutely. So thank you, everyone. Good afternoon. And yeah, saving the best for last, maybe. We just have a really quick presentation on the transit governance and funding work that this group has been doing for this fall in particular is what we're talking about. And as you know, the study is really looking at governance structures. So not really looking at what MTA is doing, but the structures that guide the decisions that they have available to them. And some of the things that the problems that we're really focused on addressing are, one, to make sure that the Baltimore region has a strong and clear role in decisions made about the transit service that operates in their region. And then a lot of the other goals are really focused on strengthening the autonomy of the MTA, make sure that they have clear guidance, clear funding, clear authority to make decisions, and that by having these systems and structures that are transparent and understandable, we can facilitate a more robust and participatory conversation about transit service in the Baltimore region. So I think most everybody has seen and reviewed the options that we dove into this fall. One is creating an independent regional transit authority, or an RTA. One is a state-controlled RTA. And then the third option sort of combines an enhanced role for this group, for the BRTC and the state-controlled RTA, to try to facilitate the goals and address the goals and challenges facing the region. So, and again, I'm going to go through these super quick. Many of these are very complicated, but I know you've all spent a lot of time thinking about them and looking at them. But this idea of an independent RTA is a standalone independent agency that focuses entirely on delivering and providing transit services for the Baltimore region. This type of model is the way that many transit agencies work in the United States. It's very, very common. Funding would come from federal and state sources, possibly some regional funds, passenger fares. But this idea that that a standalone agency governed by its own board would provide and execute transit services for the region. Provides a lot of independence and control, but there is a lot of liability and risk with this model, in particular because the MTA system at this moment there's been a chronic and historic underinvestment in the system. You all talked a lot today about the state of good repair. The new independent agency would inherit a lot of those challenges and be responsible for addressing them. The second model is a state-controlled RTA. This would be an independent agency that sits within state government, has its own board, has its own budget and its own dedicated revenues to execute the vision. But it would still be part of state government. And that reflects in part the fact that it is currently MTA is currently a department within state government. This time it would be an agency within the agency within state government. So more autonomy, more control, less regional authority. So kind of a different balance of those two things. There's some risks, there's some opportunities. An example from the Northeast is the MBTA, which operates as an RTA within the state of Massachusetts or the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And then the third option that we talked about was combining the state-controlled RTA with an enhanced regional transit commission. In this case, the BRTC would have a stronger role, most likely by raising their own, regional funds to support transit and then investing those funds in projects that they see viable and important to the region. So that would give an opportunity for the BRTC to invest in MTA. They could also invest in lots, or they could do something different. But and this has some advantages and disadvantages, like all of them do. The key thing here is that it does require raising regional funds, which is a difficult step in this budget climate, given the range and diversity of needs. And so just kind of wrapping things up, I just want to kind of highlight the common denominator to all of these strategies. One is all of these options, what they have in common is that they set up a board of directors that is responsible for executing the transit vision, for setting the transit vision and then executing it. And so this would kind of tease out a role of independent individuals to make those decisions. They're responsible to riders, they're responsible to taxpayers, they're responsible to MTA employees, but they would be the ones in charge. And then parallel with that is a dedicated funding stream so that the board knows how much money it has this year, it knows how much money it's going to have next year, can't be taken by any political changes or leadership changes. It is that funding belongs to the RTA. They decide how to spend it, and then they can develop and execute the vision for regional transit in the Baltimore region. So it's kind of a super quick, high-level overview of what the study has in it. Of course, there's a lot more details and a lot more information, but really we wanted just to kind of bring this back, close it out with you all, give people an opportunity to ask questions, and maybe you all want to talk about next steps.
Thanks, Bethany. I mean, I just want to remind, at least from my perspective, the Train Commission still has in its, I'll call it Train 2.0, which has not yet issued a report, has in its charge what Train 1.0 had, which is to study the efficacy, I forget the exact word, of regional transit authorities, et cetera. Train 1.0 did not do that. It was time constrained. Train 2.0 has not really issued a report yet. You'll recall that basically we said, well, we have these consultants have already done work for BMC because some of this work was done as part of the original transit governance and funding study that then Delegate Bridges chaired. So we're gonna like use that resource and try and advance this discusussion, sort of like a public service, like let's keep the ball rolling here. And I think that's what we've done. The more we got into it, the more we realized that there's so many implications, funding implications in particular, that are well beyond the scope of what this commission could reasonably talk about and feel like we were really gonna we're just gonna be sort of, entertaining ourselves. So I think what we try to do is but there is nothing that I'm aware of elsewhere in the state, Train having not culminated, that in writing says, all right, like what are the options? What's the baseline, what are the options? And depending on who you speak with in this ecosystem, some people know this stuff well, other people don't know it at all. And the report, I think, is simple and clear enough that it gives people sort of a range of options and stuff to think about. I do think, and I think that's in a way the highest and best use of it, considering sort of who we are and what our charge is for now. The slide that Bethany had, I think is very important, is something I feel strongly about, which is the baseline requirements slide, thank you. Because the idea here is to create something that changes the landscape in a meaningful way. We're not just trying to rearrange the sort of deck chairs. And to me, I'm speaking for myself here, but I think people generally seem to agree. There should be a board that has actual power of some, that is more than this commission has, but not necessarily as far as a full-blown independent, authority. Somewhere, and some sort of dedicated funding so that we're not always at the mercy of the potential changing whims. I don't feel like we're at the mercy of this particular Secretary of Governor. I feel like they're allies, but that is not necessarily, going to be the case, and it was certainly not the case that long, not that long ago. So I think, what we're trying to do is to give folks some structure for the discussion and to set some expectations from our perspective about what would be what would really be, baseline requirements. So I'm happy to hear thoughts about it, but I don't know what else to do at this point. And I think we're gonna have to see what happens in the General Assembly with respect to this, because it's just not clear whether the bill we mentioned earlier about Mark or, it's a bit up in the air, but we're trying, we got this out in advance of the session to say to people, look, we think you really need to have this conversation. I frankly think the conversation's gonna get had at some point, whether it's in 2025 or not, I don't know. And we wanted to sort of get in the game on this conversation. And so we have, and that's the best I can sort of characterize this. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you feel differently than that, if you think I've mischaracterized it or missed something, happy to talk about it. So if this heats up in any way, we will figure out how to get the commission involved. We are not going to make this happen. We're just going to keep the issue before people and be an informed, sophisticated resource and conversationalist on the subject. So we will let you know. And that also is a bit of a segue to say, the 2 months. The every other month cycle, which I support, does create, during the legislative session, does create a little bit of awkwardness or potential awkwardness. We will figure out how to keep the commission fully apprised of things that it needs to be apprised of. And if necessary, I will not hesitate to call a special meeting. We can do it virtually if we need to, whatever. If we think that something is happening, we're like, look, we just can't wait until whenever the next meeting is. So that may happen, it may not. We're just gonna have to see what happens in the session. But I think all the things that have been said here by Lester and by the deputy chief about engaging, I would really encourage everybody to wearing the commission hat, wearing your whatever hat you've been appointed with. You're obviously, you have a relationship with your appointing authority, your county executive, et cetera. We all need to get in the game here. Otherwise, all the promise that exists for state of good repair and such is just going to evaporate. So we've got to make it happen. So any final comments on that before we have a few minutes for public comments as we typically do at the end? Okay, thank you. Dawn, do you have anybody either online or in person who wishes to comment?
No.
No. Okay. Bethany, thank you very much, and we'll figure out. Well, like I said, thanks for your work. Thanks for that very brief but totally sort of helpful, quick framing of it.
Okay, great, thanks. Happy
So,
Friday.
nothing else. The next March, help me out here, March 7th, you will get Outlook requests for that. Again, September is going to have to slide a little bit, but that's far enough away. Hopefully it won't cause anybody any big problems. Does anybody have anything else they want to raise for the benefit of the commission? Don, you do?
Yeah, well, actually,
Go right ahead.
Yeah, you've seen you perhaps have seen two invites, at least one from me, for a session that the Greater Washington Partnership is holding in Annapolis on a study they've done with Ernst & Young to look at the investments of MTA in the state and what economic impact they've had. That's on the 22nd of the month. If you need me to resend that to you, let me know. There's a City for All meeting on the 25th of January.
It's Saturday, I think, isn't it?
It's a Saturday at John Hopkins East Campus. That the commission may also be interested in attending.
Please send those, and I think that's organized by Delegate Lewis by and large, with other people participating. So, yeah, if you would send those two things around, I do expect to be able to go. I'm out of town Saturday, but I do expect to go to the Annapolis, the breakfast that you just mentioned, to represent the commission, and obviously everybody is encouraged and welcome. It will be, I think, a powerful tool. The EY who did the report is very sophisticated. These are kind of these, I'm sure everybody's seen these kind of econometric, direct jobs, implied, that sort of framework, indirect, that they do. It's good to have sophisticated third-party validation of what we know to be true, but of course, it's nice to see the actual numbers for our purposes and for MTAs. Okay, is there a motion to adjourn? Second? All opposed, aye? All opposed, aye? We're adjourned. Thank you all very much. Go Ravens.